Give me a permission to record as well?
I
Sure.
can. Sometimes we even remember to do that.
I think I had a thing come up saying you guys are going to record it. So
Yep. Perfect.
nothing I
Vlad
say
should-
can be used against me.
Nothing.
There we
Well,
go.
we do warn everyone that this is live, Benson. I
Right.
don't think we necessarily have to worry about you, but generally letting everyone know that that it is live is an important thing.
It is. It's common courtesy.
It is. Yes. Especially as things that we say will absolutely live in the internet in infamy forever. But no, as I told you, Benson, we normally give everyone a couple of minutes to get in to see the conversation, and I'm very interested to talk about what you guys are doing with the Rios and with the grooves on the
Okay.
power management side. I think that's interesting. I've seen, especially like the inductive automation folks, they're
Mhm.
all big into like home automation, and I've seen what they've built on it. It is not surprising that you guys at Opto are also big into putting your own hardware everywhere you possibly can.
Yeah, we generally do. All of our engineers have it. They can run their sprinklers. They can run all kinds of things.
That's
Energy
really cool.
monitoring in general, I think it's gaining a lot of traction, or at least when I was at P&G, they had a lot of incentives, to try and reduce energy usage in general, because I think a lot of the big companies have those goals, right? Like we want to reduce waste, we want to reduce energy usage. So I think it's an important piece of
We
hardware.
went through that exercise here. We have a plaque hanging down on the wall from Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was our California
Oh,
governor.
The
Thanking us.
governor.
Yeah, the governor thanking us for our contribution because we went through that exercise here, Vlad, in this factory. Happy to
Yeah,
talk
makes
about that too.
Dave, I think we are live. Do you want to go through a few announcements?
Yeah, let's go through a couple of announcements. Thank you everyone for coming in. As normal on most weeks, I'm gonna yammer on while we let everyone get in. As we have to say at the very beginning, Solus PLC has now cracked 21,000 subscribers. Benson, we are on the push to get Vlad to 50,000 and then 100,000 to have a play button above there on his shoulder. He
Right
doesn't
on.
want to seem to push it, but we talk about it every week. So Vlad, you guys are getting close. So if anyone watching this has not subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. Something that I think is like semi-professional. We've done this 18 or 19 times now. Podcasters were supposed to like ask people to go out and give us like a thumbs up and 5-star reviews and all of those great things. If you guys want to catch back episodes, you can find Vlad and I on manufacturinghub.live. And as we will talk about in the coming minutes, Benson is doing the rounds, putting together a bunch of amazing webinars over everything. And he has a webinar coming up next week or in a couple of weeks with the folks at Cirrus Link. They're talking about MQTT and cybersecurity. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we go through this. But I've also dropped the link to that. I think, Benson, either you or Arlen are nearly must watch at some point on a seemingly monthly basis. I think both of you guys must make everyone feel better about themselves and all of their life choices with the amount of passion that you bring to this industry.
Well, thank you for that. That was very, very kind comments. And yeah, I think I feel like I can speak for Arlen as well. As we love this stuff. So
absolutely. Perfect. No, I think that sounds good. Vlad, would you like to kick us off?
I did want to make 2 more announcements. So number 1 being the Preston Hadley Change a Life giveaway. So that's still going on. I believe there's only 1 week to enter the giveaway. I'm going to post some links on LinkedIn and YouTube. And then the second one being Chris Lukey, who was with us last week. So he is hosting the, I forgot the exact name of the series, but every week he's discussing a topic that is, I guess like misunderstood in manufacturing, and starts a conversation about it. I think there's been a pretty good audience yesterday, and that happens every Tuesday as of 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. If you want to check that out, connect with Chris Lukey. But without any further delay, So this is episode number 18 of the Manufacturing Hub with Dave Griffith and myself, Vlad. Today we've got Benson Hougland with us. We're going to be talking about his career, his path in Opto22. We're going to talk about technology. We're going to talk about the way he approaches strategy. We're going to talk about his house that is fully automated. We're going to talk about some of the very interesting devices that Opto22 has to offer. Very surprising to hear about, I guess, like policies and how like everything works and how a company approaches the challenges. So without any further delay, Benson, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit? I know that you're fairly known in the space, but could you give us a little intro?
Yeah, sure. My name is Benson Hougland. Work here at Opto22. We're in Temecula, California. We're about an hour north of San Diego. And in this facility that I'm in, I'm demoing live. Actually, let me just give you a quick look at what that looks like. I'm broadcasting live from my Opto demo studios here. May look a little small because you guys are just getting my main camera view, but that's where I'm sitting. And the facility is actually looks like this. So there's my aerial shot of Opto22 headquarters. And like I said, about an hour north San Diego. It's where we design, manufacture, sell, support everything we do out of this building. So that's where I'm broadcasting live from right now. But I do want to say that first and foremost, thank you guys. Thank you guys for inviting me to participate in this great show. I'm a massive fan of this community building that has been so prevalent over the past several years now. So many people have stepped up and created just these fantastic communities, Industry 4.0 TV, the Industry 4.0 solutions, the Mastermind program. Kudos to Walker and Zach and Kudzai and you guys. I think this is just so important for our industry. And we support it 100%. So it's my pleasure to be here. Hopefully we can talk about some cool stuff.
Really appreciate it. Thank you a lot, Benson. Let me, I guess, a small side note, a cool fact that I found really interesting about the facility is the fact that Google actually went inside and shot a tour. And so you can go on Google Maps and actually put the little, I don't know if you can show that live, but you can put the little icon inside the facility and kind of have a 3D tour. So there have been pictures taken inside the facility. So if you're curious what that looks like, then yeah, you could look at the full virtual tour, which is pretty cool. I haven't seen anything like that before. And as you know, a lot of companies are extremely proprietary with their process. So it's cool to see that you guys allow that. And yeah, especially now with COVID, I think it's like ahead of its time in a way.
It's kind of cool because, in COVID, to your point, one of the challenges that we had is we loved having visitors here. We loved having people come and, come for training, get a tour of our facility, see how this stuff is made. We've been in business for 47 years. A lot of our products are, we eat our own dog food. A lot of our products are made with our own products. But in the age of COVID, it was obvious we had to close the doors. And this gave us an opportunity to, do something somewhat familiar to what you see on Google Maps. So I can actually literally walk down the halls. In fact, right to the left here is our training facility. So there you go. You're getting a shot of what it's like to come to training at Opto22. Our factory is in here. Our shipping and receiving is in here. There's a lot of ways to kind of interact and show people what we're about. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out. That is one of the cool things about technology today. Just another way of sharing our experiences with others and kind of let them immerse themselves in what we're trying to do.
No, it's definitely unique. I'll give you that. It's really cool. I want to get back to your career at Opto22. So for anyone who types in your name in Google, they're most likely going to find the TEDx talk that you did back in 2014, correct me if I'm wrong, which was on IIoT. And so you've presented it very well, I find, for those who, I guess at that time, it was not as popular and was like fairly unknown to I would say, people even outside of the industry, right? And so fast forward, I guess from there, it's really difficult to find any of the early career information about you, Benson. So I'd be
Right.
really curious to hear, how did you, well, first of all, get started in engineering, right? Like what drew you to electrical engineering, to software, hardware? And then what did the early days at Opto22 look like?
So yeah, my days working with this technology certainly began before my stint here at Opto. I've been at Opto since 1995. So in the 80s in college, I was just a techie. I was just, as I said in my TED talk, I'm a geek. And that's, I think that's just a part of my DNA, as it is for many of us who are in this field. And honestly, I was doing a lot of stuff over on the IT side of the world. So, networking and software, and I had started a business, Perfect PC, back in the day. And then I encountered a good friend of mine. We met through our wives. We were playing music together. I play harmonica. He played guitar. We, do our thing around the campfire. And I asked him, what do you do? And he says, well, I'm a controls engineer. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty interesting. Tell me more. And so he kind of showed me what he was doing. And he was basically taking an old IBM industrial PC, connected to IO like what I have here on my desk, and making things turn on, turn off, getting values, putting them on the screen. We're talking the 80s here. So I was blown away. And I inevitably sold my business, got into business with him. We started doing a lot of engineering, industrial automation applications all over the Rocky Mountain regions. So oil and gas, mining, food and bev, government facilities. And then speaking of government facilities, I got holed up in a proving grounds, a popular one, or the primary one actually in the state of Utah. Making DCSs and VAX computers work with, IO systems that were, doing things I can't discuss. Let's just say that. And then, of course, on the other side of the mountain range over in Wyoming, I spent months, getting rock data, remote operation controllers. Back then, they were Fisher rocks, talking to fix DMAX, an old Involution product, and that kind of really just got me very involved in all the stuff we were doing. But all the while, we started a distribution house for IBM industrial computers, Involution software, and Opto22. And I just immediately fell in love with Opto's approach to the technology, what they were doing, how the philosophy in building these products, really building fun tools that allowed you to do things way outside the box. And that intrigued me to a very high degree. And so I started working with the Opto products. I got a nice invite from our VP of sales, currently still VP of sales here at Opto, Bob Shepard, says, hey, you want to come on board Opto? I leapt at the chance. So, and then that was in 1995, and just kind of worked my way up from there.
Just curious, what kind of products at the time were, like available or piqued your curiosity at Opto? Because obviously they didn't have the same lineup, 20 years ago.
Yeah. So, it goes way back. Opto is considered sort of, particularly back then, the leader in PC-based control, taking regular computers and tying them to, to IO systems, kind of like, well, this one's a little bit different, but this rack of IO here, this one's a special one. I'll get to that later, but connecting to this kind of stuff and doing controls with a PC. But when I came on board, we had a system called the Mystic system. And for those of people that are familiar with Opto or been with us for the decades, we've been in business since 1974. The Mystic system was really kind of a cool amalgamation of industrial controls with PC-based controls. So it ended up becoming really more of a hybrid product. In fact, the microprocessor on that Mystic processor was a 68020, the same processor that was in that day's Mac computer.
That's the Apple. Yeah, that's the
Apple computer. Yeah, exactly. And then we went a step further. Each of the remote IO modules had an Intel ADC196 processor on it. So the remote IO could do PID loop control, could do thermocouple linearization, could do latching and counting. So it really was not a PLC. It wasn't a full DCS. It was a hybrid. And so that was the product that really introduced me to Opto's Mystic, MISTIC. I even, I had a boat at the time. I even named my boat Mystic. I was just so so swooned by the whole thing. But that was the products that we launched back then, or were selling back then. And today's products, the Groove Epic and Groove Rio, are really just that processor technology, that compute, that networking capability, just now 25, almost 30 years later. So continuous improvement, as they say.
No, absolutely. It's really interesting, I guess, to hear how the process still for the, I guess, in the grand scheme of things remain the same, right? So we're doing things just faster, more intelligently, we're pulling a lot more data. But at the end of the day, those like core principles, like you're still getting IO from the field, you're still sending outputs, you're still getting your analog, like that still hasn't changed, at the core, which I find like really interesting. There haven't been that many like new ways of perhaps like extracting or sending those signals.
Yeah, you're right on the money. We still deal with 4 to 20s, 0 to 10s, discretes, whether it's AC loads, DC inputs, photo eyes, you name it. Those are all generally pretty much the same. It's what you do with that data is what's exciting today. It used to be, you tie that into a PLC, you create your rungs and rails, and essentially that process was just all about what was going to happen in the PLC to operate a piece of machinery, better, more quickly, more reliably. But then the age came where, hey, this data could be useful to some other application. And, speaking again to when I came on board Opto in the mid 90s, in 1996, we teamed up with 4 other software companies. One of them was Rockwell Software before they were Rockwell Automation. And the other, of course, was Microsoft. Microsoft wanted to own manufacturing. So we all got together and we created something called OLE for process control. You guys know what that's called today?
No.
OPC.
Okay.
OPC. So OPC was originally OLE for process control. OLE was object linking and embedding. That's
okay.
A story for another time. But the first draft specification of the OPC spec was drafted in this building just down the hall. And that kind of led that whole effort of how do we start democratizing this data? How do we make it easier to get this 4 to 20, 0 to 10, discrete values, whatever they are, to other applications, to SCADA, to HMI, to a database, whatever. So those were very, that's mid 90s. And then, shortly after that, we did Ethernet IO. And that was kind of comical to some degree. We spent a lot of time surveying our customers. We're in the midst of the field bus wars back then. What was a good alternative? And the problem with field bus wars was everybody had their own physical medium, their own copper, their own cable, blue hose, whatever you want to call it. And we thought, well, what if we could standardize the cable and just run software or protocols over a given cable? And of course, everybody that we talked to Ethernet, our customers love the idea, but the vendor community was basically, we don't know what you guys are smoking down there in Southern California, but there is no chance that Ethernet will ever get to the plant floor. So you guys should just give up now. We know how that.
What did they have?
out.
I guess, sorry to interrupt, because I guess I wasn't in the industry at that time. So I'm curious, like, what were the main protocols at that time when you were suggesting Ethernet?
Well, data highway was obviously one of the big ones. So blue hose, there was Profibus networks to some degree back then. They called there was a spec, and they call it the 8-headed monster that was meant to, try to reel in all these different field bus protocols. And there were a lot of them. A lot of them, some Aussie bus was another, even DeviceNet. So there was quite a few of them out there. But as soon as, in fact, when we came out with Ethernet IO, Modbus TCP wasn't even available yet. It was just still Modbus serial. And so here's a fun little story. When we started Ethernet IO, we had to come up with a protocol to put it on, to put on the wire. And originally we were going to do also a FireWire version, FireWire IEEE 1394. And so we ended up not doing the FireWire physical medium. We stuck with Ethernet, Cat5. 802.3 to be more accurate. And that said, we adopted the Opto the MMP, the 1394 protocol, FireWire protocol. We adopted that memory area essentially, and that became Opto MMP. It was a FireWire protocol, IEEE 1394, and it's the same protocol we use today over TCP. Now there's Modbus TCP. Now there's, control net turned into Ethernet IP, and don't get me started when that got named. But there's a lot of that going on back in that day, but the world's very different now. Oh, somebody's running one of our demos and just started the turbine behind me.
Perfect. No,
for anybody who might be watching, this is the turbine you just started. So for
so you can remote in and play with the hardware.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it looks like
I hope it's someone watching the stream.
Yeah, it's probably somebody watching the stream, but yeah, it's just you go to demo.groove.com, and we have all of our technologies live right on the public web.
Oh wow!
So this one here is we got the Deep Sea Challenger. We were talking the other day about some of the crazy applications we've done, like the Bellagio fountains and SeaWorld, and we even did one called the Deep Sea Challenger, where James Cameron built a vessel to go to the bottom of the world's oceans. Yeah, turns out he loves diving. So he built this vessel, and it's all run by Opto. This is the actual HMI that was used in the sub. But I digress.
That's really cool.
We can get back on track, guys. I could go on like this for.
Well, where's the demo? I guess, can you show us? Okay, so that's the demo screen. Gotcha. Huh.
Yep. So somebody came in here and turned on the turbine. So I'll just go ahead and turn it off, because it can get they have it run on price. This is great. This is a controller that you see behind me. That is literally logging in and getting the real-time spot price for electricity on the California grid. And based on the price that they're paying, it will run the turbine only when they can make money. So it's that's what started it. Look at this. The price of electricity they're paying for right now is $73 per megawatt.
Wow.
The set point was $69. So if I change that back up to 99, which is where I usually have it, turbine turns off. Anyway, fun stuff.
That's really cool. I mean, I think, like, personally, just the accessibility of like hardware and software from vendors is extremely important. I think the younger engineers, or the ones that are entering the field now, really need to play with the hardware and software, and just making these demos available is extremely critical, right? Because the more difficult it is to purchase a piece of hardware and download documentation, like whatever that may be, the less reluctant, or the more reluctant they will be to using it. So having something like that in place, I didn't even know that I could log in and play with the demo behind you. So that's really cool. Either.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. And behind the scenes of this demo is also we have a close partner we work with, software partner, and that's of course inductive automation in their Ignition platform. So everything that I just did there was all done via MQTT. So they, cool. It's a way for us to show just how powerful this technology is. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about those technologies? Because I think it's also important to recognize the fact that, similarly to how Opto22 had presented the idea of Ethernet back in the day, some of these new technologies are still quite early, I feel, in their adoption life cycle. And so I'm curious to maybe hear you talk about some of the challenges that I would say end users, manufacturers come to you with when it comes to adopting these new things. Like, what kind of maybe things do they say? How do you respond to that? I'm just interested in hearing your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I have many, believe me. The reality is, as a vendor, we're not just about pitching products. I mean, naturally, we need to sell products to keep the lights on. But at the end of the day, it's about understanding what tools we can pull together that help, an engineer, a control tech, a software developer achieve a given goal, a business outcome. And, back in the days of Ethernet, I told you that nobody was using it on the plant floor. That was true. But more importantly, hardly anybody knew anything about TCP IP, because that's where the real magic happens. The Cat5 is it's copper. But what runs on that is TCP IP. And so we had to teach people TCP IP addressing, for example, subnet masking, what a switch is, and what a hub was. So it became very much an educational process. And we're in the midst of that today. We've got a lot of new technologies that we're talking about, that are being talked about on platforms like yours. And of course, I'm talking about things like MQTT, like zoning, segmenting networks, cybersecurity. And these are topics that are, very important from a strictly technology perspective, but what kind of problems do they solve? And how do you get your head around how it actually works? And so to your point, a lot of our efforts today are spent on that, on trying to educate people of why these technologies matter, how they work, and what problems they solve. And of course, we wrote the spec for OPC that solved a problem in the mid-90s. The problems today are different. The times they have changed. And for that reason, this notion of a pub-sub model for moving data around can become very, very critical, particularly from cybersecurity, performance, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's kind of our focus today is, yes, we can, we've always had an engineering philosophy here at Opto22 of combining this rugged OT systems, right? Whether they're IO modules or PLCs, whatever, very rugged, wide temperature range, put them anywhere, they run forever. But how can we combine some IT technologies that adds incredible new value to them, from the idea of moving data where it needs to go, to providing remote access, to allowing virtually any systems to communicate with each other, which is really kind of what the IoT was all about back in my TED talk. It wasn't necessarily the technology; it was what can it provide. How can it make our lives better in the case of IoT? And of course, that was just a discussion. But we're seeing the same thing happening on the plant floor and the use of these technologies. And it's not easy, Vlad. The reality is some of these concepts are very new. Trust me, when we came out with Ethernet, everybody's like, you know what, my RS-45 is just fine. Okay, so we're going to have a lot of folks that are going to stick with RS-45. That's fine. But there are engineers out there that have ideas, and they want to change the world in their own way. And we've all been part of that. We have an idea, and how can we get it done? It's not a product that's going to necessarily get that done, but the right tools, and the tools with the right capabilities. And by stitching your ideas together with the right tools is how you can make something magical happen. And that's what we all live for. Yeah, we get paid. Yeah, we are responsible for keeping the machines running or the process going. But there's nothing more gratifying than solving a problem with the right tools, and go to bed that night and think, wow, I killed it today. That's the essence of what we do here. Is we want to live that every day. That's what drives us. And when I get a call from a customer or an integrator, and they say, all they have to do is say 3 words, Benson, it worked. And that's all I need. That's all. That's why I do this. And that's the best feeling in the world.
And if I may add to that thought, right, I think like the problems or the solutions to those problems are not always like as obvious as one may think, right? It's not necessarily just, let's say, applying data to your process, but it's also on the implementation side, because I've been through that process myself, where you have to pull in, instead of back in the day where it's like 100 tags per machine, now it has become 10,000 tags, right? And so the infrastructure changes a lot, and you have to look at also not just like the end result, but also how many hours it takes in that case. And also, I think it's also important to talk about, people entering the industry, because whether we want it or not, I think there is a shortage of personnel that is available to, let's say, program and automate all these systems right now that is in growing demand. And I think the pool, as you had mentioned, kind of from the IT side, or maybe the more traditional software space, is much larger, right? So by changing the way we do certain things, we might open up the door to a lot more people, right? And then there's a lot more, I would say, like intangible things that comes with that, right? Like new ideas, new ways of doing things. Like we started adopting things as straightforward as version control, right? In software that has been there for decades, that is only now trickling in with some proprietary tools, but some companies that are doing it a little bit better. You know what I mean? But it has been a known solution. So we are benefiting from that shift in the industry, I feel.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. 2 things that jumped out at me. One is that, largely we're a risk-averse industry. No question about this. We do something wrong, somebody could get hurt. So, we tend to be very risk averse and use only tools or technologies that we're very, very comfortable with and can be very confident that when we put them in, they'll do the job and be safe and everything else that we're asked to do. But we have to continuously reinvent ourselves. And so recognizing it is a risk averse industry, a lot of the technologies that we are talking about, MQTT, Ethernet, and so on, they have been around a long time, utilized in other domains.
Mm-hmm.
But can we benefit from those in the OT domain? And I say yes, absolutely. We did it with Ethernet. We did it with OPC. We did it with some other technologies. We were one of the first companies to put full RESTful APIs, for anybody who knows what that is, on our controllers to allow software developers to come and get the data when they needed it. So, that's, to me, that's an important thing. And so it becomes a question for us as a community, as an OT community. What are some of those technologies that I should probably pay attention to, learn a little bit more about, that will allow me to broaden my tool set? Because at the end of the day, that's what it is. How can I broaden my tool set? How can I get to know how to use that screwdriver a little better, or that hammer a little bit better, or maybe a version of a hammer, whatever it is. And that's what we're faced with today. We have some of these technologies that MQTT was invented in 1999 for a SCADA application. Yet, Facebook ran off with it and Amazon ran off with it. And there's a lot of implementations of MQTT. It's kind of come back now, of course, to the industrial arena. But, how can we take those tools, pull them in and give these engineers and developers these capabilities? That said, there will always be a segment of the community of the OT space that is not willing to move on, just like they weren't really, ready to move to a mobile phone. I mean, how many people stayed with, a flip phone instead of going to a smartphone, whatever. It takes time, and we understand that. We're not asking anybody to do something uncomfortable. We just want to make them aware. And so most of what we try to do is education. This is why this technology works this way, and this is the problem that it solves. And if applied appropriately, can make a big change in your business. Whether you're an OEM, which is a big part of our customer base, process control, discrete manufacturing, water, wastewater, utility, doesn't matter. I mean, some of our biggest projects have nothing to do with industrial automation. We're on over 10,000 cell towers all over the United States. There's very, very little control there, and certainly not real-time control.
And how did that happen?
Funny story. So we came out with Ethernet IO. We got this TCP/IP stack on a remote IO system, and there was a company that is essentially a real estate company that purchased all the cell towers from the likes of Verizon, Singular back then, AT&T, and so on, and then would lease the space back to the carriers to hang their antennas. What they didn't realize is as soon as they did that, they became responsible for notifying the FAA if a tower light ever went out. There's a lot of red lights that are blinking on the top of towers. That light goes out, you got to file what's called a NOTAM, a notice to airmen. Well, suddenly they had thousands and thousands of these towers that they just owned and are leasing space out, yet they had a SCADA problem. Well, these guys don't know anything about SCADA, but what they did have is something from the IT space called network management tools. Back then it was Computer Associates Unicenter or HP OpenView. These are things that you see in IT and data centers and so on. And the technology, the protocol that was used then was something called SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol. Well, we had a TCP/IP stack on our IO. So we just turned on SNMP. Anytime a light went out, we sent an SNMP trap back to the NOC, Network Operations Center, and suddenly they could manage their whole fleet of cell towers. But my point is it's, we're in a lot of different industries. We do a lot of different things, but they're all enabled by these kinds of technologies.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I think, an important point we talked about yesterday was that I think some of these technologies don't get the right reputation because they're still early on. That being said, they are constantly being worked on, right? And I'm thinking of Node-RED that you've released very early on. And I think, again, as you mentioned it very well, it is a tool in your tool belt, right? Like you may choose not to use it as an earlier version, right? Like when it's still unproven, it maybe like you get your like a few small applications here and there. You test it out, you learn how to use it, and then once it hits a certain revision that you're more comfortable with, then you'd be able to deploy it at a larger scale, right? So it's not a like, it's not that you're suggesting that all of these tools should be implemented and replace
Correct.
everything that you've got on the manufacturing floor, but it's something that's certainly gaining traction. And the earlier you start gaining experience, because again, there is a learning curve for everybody, I feel, on every single tool. But knowing multiple tools on how to solve certain problems could be very beneficial down the road, if or how they be, depending on how they grow.
I totally agree with that. We saw the same thing in Ethernet. Back then, it was mostly hubs. Switches were too expensive or too complicated. Now everybody uses a switch, but at the time it was, you know, you had to learn. You had to be a Cisco certified network administrator. You had to do, you know, those days are long over. I can buy a 8-port switch on Amazon for $8. You know, so one of the things that we've always recognized is if we adopt the right technologies that have a future, and it's clear that it does, then a lot of the industry will take care of that for us. Another example is TLS security, TLS encryption for making connections to servers. If you go to Google right now and type in any search term, you'll notice there's a little padlock up in your URL. Google does not allow you to connect to their servers without encryption. And guess what? We benefit from that. Everything that's happened in the TLS space or SSL space, if applied, will benefit from that. So the Ciscos of the world who come out with better networking technologies, we benefit. For software houses that are, you know, or for the Linux community that's developing new ways of moving information around or storing it or whatever at an OS level, we benefit from it. And I think that's the key. Rather than one company having to do everything and do everything really well, let's adopt some of these open source technologies like Node-RED to solve a given problem. You know, Node-RED is the tool I'm using to connect to the Cal ISO, you know, database to pull back real-time pricing on 5-minute interval. Could I have done that with a PLC? Maybe, you know, if I was pretty skilled, but let's be honest, you're one of the best PLC programmers out there, but there's a very few of you out there. So there's a lot of people that know things like JavaScript and JSON, the primary technologies of Node-RED. Yep. So, you know, that I think that's the key too, is, you know, a tool like MQTT or Node-RED or whatever has underlying technologies that are very well known, well understood. So when I authenticate to my Epic or to my Rio here on my desk, I can do that through an LDAP server, a centrally managed way of managing accounts on a PLC. So now we're embracing the technology that's well understood, and has been in play for decades, but now we can start applying those to provide security and account management for a PLC. That's the path we see things going in.
Yeah. Dave, I want to give you an opportunity to jump in as well.
So we were just going down this path, and I love the last few minutes of conversation, Benson and Vlad, where you guys are talking about how Opto kind of at its core is a technology company, right? Like you guys are a bunch of probably nerdy technology engineering folks. I mean, I think it's honest. And I love the point where you talked about, you know, looking forward, how we can bring seemingly like more consumer, more IT technologies into what we use in manufacturing. I love what you said about education, and feel like we would almost be remiss if we didn't talk about all of the educational videos that Opto22 has put out for at least the last 4 or 5 years, from about the point in time that you guys got on my radar, generally from the inductive automation community. You know, there are regularly videos talking about, you know, your technology, talking about MQTT, talking about Node-RED. And I think all of that is important. And kind of, as you mentioned, I think it benefits everyone in the community to have access to more of those. And so I want to thank you for that and everything that you're doing. And a few minutes ago, Vlad had brought up something about, you know, how it can be difficult for young people or engineers to purchase, you know, technologies. And this is going to be the plug to what I believe is that Groove Epic Learning Center, like directly behind you, with that LED. So I remember purchasing one of those with a systems integration company. Well, you don't have it in and an LED, Vlad. We need to
He
fix
was an
that.
early
LED.
adopter.
He was, yeah. But can you talk a little bit about, you know, what that is and kind of the goals of that, and if there still is training that, you know, a couple of seats of training that come along with that? Because I think that that's a very I think that that's a very awesome offer that you guys have.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that lead in. The Epic Learning Center and now the Groove Real Learning Center. I'll show you my cooking cam here. That's a real learning center with the same kind of acrylic background there, connected to an Allen Bradley PLC, securely zoned, all that stuff we can talk about later. And then, yeah, the one behind me, and of course it's sitting here as well, is the Epic Learning Center, a completely packaged, basically completely packaged piece of hardware that allows people to learn how these systems work. Not just from a hardware perspective, though. Yeah, you can tie in I/O, you got temperature, you got 0 to 10 on there, some discretes, but the software, you know, when we talk about the capabilities of these systems, you know, they're largely unleashed by software. And that's what we have to educate, because there's so many options out there. Think of your smartphone, right? You've got a smartphone. It's a single piece of hardware. It's a device, but on it, I can run all kinds of software based on what it is I need to do. Again, tools. So you may use one piece of software or app on your phone, may be very different than the one I might use, but we still know what software or what app to get to do the job. We've done the same thing with Epic. So one of the other things that what we've done is, if I take a look at this screen here, this is our training website. So you asked about training. It's free. You can come in here, you can go into Groove Epic, and there's videos on here about configuring Groove Epic, about, you know, control programs. And here's another thing for you guys. When you buy a PLC, you're buying the software too, and you have to usually pay for it. But that aside, what we try to do with Epic is give you a choice. There's some folks who want to program an IEC 61131, write in ladder, write in structured text, whatever. Or they may choose to use our own flowchart software. The key is choices. The key is the right tool for the job. So we try to cover all that, whether it's Ignition software running on there, whether it's Node-RED, whether it's Code Assist, it doesn't matter. They're all on there. They're like apps on your phone, but they're apps on a PLC, you know, a highly industrialized PLC. And so that's kind of what our training program has been about. Yes, we push all these out to YouTube. In fact, if you did a search, I probably should just do it here and see if it's still the case. But if I type in here, introduction to Node-RED, see if I can spell it right. Generally, our videos come up #1. And I don't know, we've got several 400,000 views on this particular video, which is just the fundamentals of Node-RED. Same thing with MQTT. So getting back to what we said earlier, education is key. And so we try to provide a lot of these different ways of learning about these technologies. But here's a question I get a lot. As control engineers, as system technicians, control techs, even an instrumentation tech, it doesn't matter. What kind of things should I be learning to prepare myself to going forward, digital transformation, IoT, and so on? I say, look no further than your own home. And by that, I mean, networking is absolutely a key piece of any digital transformation, IoT. Even just traditional controls today has a heavy reliance on networking. And guess what? You have a network in your home, and you actually have a zoned network in your home. You have your local LAN where all your PCs and all your smart devices and whatnot live on. And then you have a connection to the internet, which is another zone. And you have a firewall, and it prevents incoming traffic. And I can have devices communicate on my local LAN, but not expose those to the internet. Yeah. Look no further than your home. Understand IP addressing, how these devices get an IP address, how they get out to the internet, how you provide that security. There's a lot you can learn in your home that will go a long way to preparing you for these technologies that we're talking about today and are being implemented at a rapid rate.
Absolutely. And I think you've mentioned this earlier, but I often recommend the CCNA as I guess, a structured approach if you really want to buy, a set of books that will walk you through those same topics of, again, like basic networking, a little bit of cybersecurity, routing, how to set
Mhm.
up VLANs, why you even need VLANs, like how traffic is being directed inside of a small network. I think it's a very important like understanding to have, especially with the merging of OT and IT spaces, right?
Absolutely.
It's something that I think in the past you could be a controls engineer that purely programs or PLC and HMI that are segmented inside of a machine. But at this point in time, with the amount of data, again, as we had mentioned, it's
Right.
just impossible to do it without networks, right? And controls engineers are often now the ones who not only set up, the basic, let's say, managed switch on the plant floor, but now have to understand the entire infrastructure. So
Yeah, I agree. And, the last thing any of us want is to, be brought into the boardroom with IT on one side of the table and we're on the other. And suddenly, the gap widens. And it's largely because we're talking two different vocabularies.
yep.
So
Yep,
if we
absolutely.
can help ourselves by learning some of these, networking technologies, TCP/IP, VLANs, as you said, routing, all of this stuff, we go into those meetings better prepared. And a lot of this isn't just gobbledygook, and then we have to throw up our hands and say, "Hey, listen, we're in the OT space. We make stuff work. We don't want to get the 3 a.m. call." You can have a collaborative discussion, right? And
Yeah.
trust me, I believe to some degree that the IT space would love to learn more about our OT devices, but right now they're scared to death of them. You know why? When you ask IT for an IP address, guess what you've done? You've shifted the responsibility of securing that device to them. They hate that.
Right.
They
No, of
hate
course,
that.
and I mean, like that space. There's a lot of like different discussions about IT that we can dive
Right.
into. But I know, especially, the fact that a lot of it is remote, right? Like I
Mhm.
think that IT has migrated to that dynamic at least like in the companies that I have seen. So it becomes very challenging when you, as a controls engineer, don't fully understand what needs to be done or how it's being done.
Mhm.
You can fall into all kinds of trouble with trying to manage a remote person that's going to implement some of the things that you need for your infrastructure. So again, I think like having that knowledge, as you said, is going to, I'd say, not only place you above all the other ones that don't have that knowledge in the job market, but also allow you to make those decisions a lot easier at the job that you
Mhm.
have, right?
Absolutely. I totally agree. And even those technologies are, let's take an example of the recent cybersecurity incident in Florida at the water plant. And it was finally revealed. How'd they get in? Oh, it was a open password to their VPN. And I'm just cringing because I'm like, why wasn't two-factor authentication turned on for that VPN? It's there. You just got to check a box, and that would have largely prevented that particular incident. In other words, the tools are constantly evolving as well. So it's getting that base fundamental understanding and then being in tune with what's coming out next and how it can be applied to solve these problems. There's no reason why we can't provide secure remote access to devices. The technology exists. It's just getting it implemented properly. So, and a lot of that starts with the fundamentals.
Benson, that's a big pushback that I had received from like end users, right? Like when they allow a third party to remote into their plant, again, like because that's done, I feel like in a very, I guess, shady way in many aspects. They put their
Absolutely.
device, they Wi-Fi to the guest network
Yep.
that's
Yep.
open, and then like anyone can gain access to the plant floor through that open Wi-Fi. So
It's
obviously you're
nuts.
gonna have problems, right? But as you said, I think with any technology, when applied incorrectly, there's going to be pitfalls. And so
That's right.
like it's recognizing that if done right, it can work. And so you shouldn't necessarily shy away from a solution because someone didn't implement it right, had a massive outage, and is
Right.
now telling the world that, hey, this doesn't work. Right.
Yep.
It's
And we
there's a
we
lot of
butt up
gray
against that
areas.
all the time. So yeah. And my opinion, I said this in other podcasts. One of the other problems we have, particularly on the plant floor, is just about every device, including every one of those devices behind you, are servers. Servers listen. You make a connection to a server, request its Modbus register, it responds back. It's listening, and it's listening on a port 502, that's not secure. Let's get rid of servers. Let's get make everything clients. Now you're not going to rip out stuff and change everything out because you want to be a client instead of a server. But technologies exist that allow us to front end those existing brownfield devices and very safely and securely protect them with all the security technology we've been talking about, SSL, TLS, whatever, network zoning. These products exist. They're ready to roll. So let's protect those assets. Let's prevent people from coming in, except and obviously, unless you're authenticated and that channel is encrypted. Again, two technologies that are readily available. Just got to learn a little bit about them and put them in. Yeah. We did a Techno white paper on cybersecurity plans. It's basically a guide for cybersecurity. Yeah, it uses our products to tell the story, but the information in the cybersecurity plan, cybersecurity guide, is useful for anyone. Network zoning, use of accounts, strong passwords, even simple stuff like that. It's all in that guide. We just need to elevate the game relative to this topic. And for companies that are putting in IIoT, digital transformation, call it what you want, this is the opportunity to address cybersecurity.
Yes.
This is our time. We have to pay attention to it, because what's happening out there, JBS, Colonial, Okla, all that, it's just going to get worse.
Right. I agree.
So now's the time.
And you're going to have a longer cybersecurity webinar, right? I believe it's either next week or the week after. Do you want to?
Yeah, next Wednesday, we're going to team up with Cirrus Link Solutions. I just did one last week with Ignition, with inductive automation. We talked a little about the Rio here next to me and how I'm zoning this Allen Bradley PLC, unsecure PLC, but still getting all of its data out, still allowing remote access to this device with a $700 little Rio. So, yes, there's that webinar, the one I just did, and then I'm doing one with CSIA coming up in the first week or second week of July. I probably should know, where we're going to talk about this topic again. Two things, the two key things about IoT, or whatever you want to call it: data democratization and cybersecurity, and they go hand in hand. And that's largely what I'll be talking about this summer on any venue that'll have me.
Good. We got a comment from Hank. He said that I found out more often lately IT has been involved in implementing networks for processes. And I mean, like I said, I think that's definitely the case. There's my opinion only, there's a cost associated with running IT or OT, I guess, infrastructure or personnel. And so probably implementing it from the IT side is usually more cost effective, just because of, again, the widespread, I feel, of technology. But again, I feel that they need to have a good understanding of the projects, the OT side, in order to implement it correctly. Otherwise, you have to still redo it in the field. That's just,
right.
What I've seen.
And it has to be, these technologies have to be applicable to brownfield. It just has to. Nobody's going to rip out this stuff and put something in just to address cybersecurity or IoT, for that matter.
Absolutely. And I would say that on the IT side, it's important to have good IT partners. It's important to have IT and OT on the same page. I've had, one of the best implementations I've done. They had a VP of IT. His name was Ralph. He was absolutely fantastic. He looked at the stuff. He's like, guys, I'm going to trust you to do the OT stuff. You tell us where we need to, drop Cat 5, Cat 6 wires. We'll get it done. You guys plug it up, and you each kind of own one side. He's like, I know enough about it to know that I don't want it to be my responsibility. I will get you connected where you need to get connected and get servers spun up where we need to get servers spun up, but the rest of it is yours. And that was one of the best partnerships we've had. Many times, in large companies and small companies, you have the IT or the person in charge of IT, and the people who actually run IT may be like a third-party vendor that you don't realize for the first 6 months of why you're having this frustration. You can't just get 2 VMs spun up. That you need to have a good partner, and it needs to be a conversation that I have found you have to have early, and you have to have buy-in from the plant manager or from the CEO down. And if you don't, you're just going to get into this fight of, oh, now it's my responsibility, and why do I have to do this? Shouldn't it be your job? And no, I don't think we should open it to the internet. And I think the thing should be air gapped, even though we know 95% of facilities that think they're air gapped absolutely are not air gapped. No, not at all. I think I found one that was actually air gapped, and we confirmed, because there was no way to upgrade the control system other than someone running out to Best Buy to buy a larger flash drive, because we
Right.
literally had to download it from the internet and plug it into another machine. But no, there are, as you were saying, Benson, a lot of facilities, a lot of companies that need to look at cybersecurity as part of their overall objective. You know, the
Right.
benefit of doing these things is you can get the world-class experts at their normal rate, sitting in their house, you know, remoting into a country in South America or a country in Europe or over to Australia from wherever they live, and you don't have to pay to put them on an airplane.
Right.
And it's 5 days worth of travel to get there for what might amount to 20 minutes worth of work. So I think all of those are important, and you getting on the proverbial soapbox to talk about the importance of it to the rest of the community will hopefully only continue to make these conversations that we have in the field even easier.
And remember that cybersecurity is not a product. And we
Mhm.
get that a lot too. Oh, I can
Yes.
check a box. No, it's not a product. It's a process.
Yes,
It is a process, a continuous process, I might add. So
absolutely.
we just have to be vigilant and stick with it and learn every day.
Absolutely.
We've
I
got
actually have, I've got,
Go ahead, Dave.
or I'm sorry, did we have a question come in? Because I got a couple
We
more
did.
questions for Benson,
Well,
but,
we did have a
please.
question. I'll throw it in and maybe we can leave it for a bit later now. So Frank asks, any discussion of blockchain for data verification and record integrity? And I guess like my thought on that also, Benson, what are your thoughts on blockchain in the industrial space? Like more umbrella, I guess, discussion. And we don't have, I mean, like that could be probably its own episode.
It
But
probably
curious
could.
about your thoughts.
Yeah.
Well, let's remember that doing the hash is CPU intensive. So, you know, making sure that we can hash these messages, put them in the blockchain, add them to the ledger, is an important technology, I believe. Will it make it to the plant floor? I think there's a potential for that. We actually have a partner, is listed on our website, one of the Opto22 partners that's IoT certified, that has done this. We offer the shell access on both our Rios and our Epics. So they've actually written their own blockchain, essentially application that runs on the Epic and sends all of its data with a ledger. So we think it's a nascent field, no question about that, but it has promise, and it could could be very exciting moving ahead. So there you go. I think there's potential. Whether it be mainstream, I mean, I don't think it will be in the short term, you know, the next year or two. But I love the work these guys are doing. They're thinking outside the box, but the only way they can think outside the box is that they're the right tools, right?
Can you
So,
share the partner just so in case people want to take a look at what they've done? I don't know.
yeah,
If,
I'm
you have
gonna. I wish Arun was here. He's my right hand man on this these kinds of things. But yeah, I'll just go to my Opto partner website here. And I think they're a recent partner, and I think we just did a, let's see, let's go to community, Opto Partners. Oh, these are all my partners, so are all our partners. So let's go to the Opto blog, because I think we just recently did a piece on them. Yeah, it wasn't Novatech. There's the webinar. Oh, oh, Raspberry Pis. I can't wait to talk about that if we can. But I'm not finding it here, but I'll find it and we can drop it in the links or something like that coming up.
Because I mean, I think it's an
Yeah,
interesting piece of technology. Sorry, Dave. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, if there is interest, I know at least 2 other groups working on blockchain or working on blockchain specifically for this industry. And if there's some interest, I bet we could get some of those folks on to talk about what they're doing in industry, either actual implementations that they've done or paths that they are taking, kind of looking for partners. So if there's interest from the community, we can absolutely put a, you know, at least a 3 or 4 episode series together.
I mean, I'd be curious just to hear from them, right? Like, what exactly are they doing? Because again, as Benson has said several times now, it's the right tool for the job, right? So it might not apply, I think, to your IO level data, but something that needs to be, again, like I've worked in FDA regulated environments.
Right.
So maybe something like that where it's compliance based and that needs to be stored on the blockchain to be retrieved again 5 years down the road. I think that's very interesting, right? But again, I'm not sure like what the costs would be, because again, there's obviously some fees associated with at least the current tokens. But if they implement their own blockchain, it might be interesting as well.
Right.
Listen, I
was
want to go
talking
back.
to a provider.
Go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
Dave.
No. If we continue down this, we're gonna derail us, and Benson is gonna be late for dinner on the on the West
Yeah.
Coast. So
That's only
why don't we
4
put a
o'clock.
pin? Oh, trust me, we could absolutely go for another 12 hours or until the power dies. But no. Why don't we continue on, and we can circle back offline, and I'll tell you guys what I'm thinking and who I know who's working on that.
Okay.
Okay.
I wanted to, I guess, like go back to the relays at Opto22, solid state relays. So you told us yesterday, so they are guaranteed for life. And I guess I haven't done like that much in-depth research, but I don't think anybody else can guarantee an electrical piece of hardware for life that is like replaced. Like, can you like elaborate a little more on that?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I'll go to my my cooking cam here. These are one of the relays that we've been making since the early 80s. And that little relay, well, that's a dry contact, so that's a bad example because dry contacts are mechanical relays. But a lot of them say 200% tested right on the relay. And that means that when we put this product together, before it's potted and filled, as you can see here, and put in the case, when we build it, we test it at full load, at full temperature range. Then once it passes that test, and not statistically tested, but every module tested, then once it passes test, we go in and we pot it, we stamp it, and we put it on the shelf. So at that point, we know it works. And
what's the point of Lean Six Sigma? Benson, you've taken away the fun of like testing 6 out of 1,000 relays. And
right. And yeah, any MBA will come in here and tell you that we're doing it all wrong, but yet we're shipping product during COVID. So we can ship from stock because we don't necessarily run as anyway, I don't want to digress too much. The long story short is we did an analysis. These never fail. And so we made them guaranteed for life. It cost us really nothing. And this module, which was probably, I don't know what the date code is on this thing, 2005. Actually, that's kind of a new module. If it ever fails, send it back. We're going to give you another one. This applies to all solid state relays. Anything is mechanical. Obviously, those have finite lives. CPUs, processor, things like that. Even the Rio has mechanical relays, so we can't do lifetime on the Rio, but we have terrific warranties on those kinds of products as well. So yeah, we stand by our reliability. It's all made here.
And you test the Rios and I guess your PLCs as well, right? To the full extent of the temperatures. I think like that's like 200%. A really cool emphasis as well.
200% tested. And we put our Rios. So this guy right here, we'll stick in the oven, -20 to 70, run it through its full battery of tests, every single one of them. And then we put it on the shelf. So yeah, we get no DOAs when it shows up at our customer or our integrator and they power it up, it's going to run. So
yeah, that's amazing.
Quality is important. Yeah.
Having worked with, many other manufacturers, I can tell you that that's not always the case with, receiving a box at the site and then having to ship it back and receive a replacement. So
right. Yeah. Nothing more frustrating than that. And
yeah, it's it's one of those things that needs to be done yesterday, and you receive the parts with a slight delay, and then the part doesn't work. It's definitely a welcome quality control check if every module is tested.
And we still make all those modules. The original 22 relays. Now you know where the name Opto22 came from. The original 22 relays we still sell today. Those are solid state and guaranteed for life. And these relays were made in the 80s and 90s, but you know what's connected to it? A Raspberry Pi. Yep. So we actually made a little board that connects to a Raspberry Pi to the GPIO pins on the Pi, allowing you to switch up to 3 amp loads, sense digital signal. This is mostly discrete. This is all discrete. But those are the kind of cool things that, some of the folks that we work with, they do a lot of proof of concepts and they'll use a Raspberry Pi. In fact, when we built Epic in Rio, we were toying around on Raspberry Pis or Arduinos or whatever. And that, was kind of the genesis for us building these products on a full Linux platform with, all the real-time extensions, industrial SSDs, fail-safe file systems, all that kind of stuff. So it's fun.
No, absolutely. And I think go ahead, Dave.
Oh, I'm sorry, Benson. So that board with the Raspberry Pi, is that something that you guys sell?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you send me? Can you send me the link after? Because that actually solves a problem that I was talking about just this morning. Yes, I need to know what that solution is, because it solves a problem that I was discussing. I don't know, 6 hours ago.
Yeah, for sure. You can count on it. Yep.
No, that's amazing. So you had talked a little bit about continuing to manufacture, and I know we had talked yesterday about how you guys have a multi-100,000 square foot facility, and if people go and look at the Google Maps view inside the facility, they can walk around the manufacturing floor. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys, maybe not being necessarily as lean as most MBAs would suggest, has allowed you to continue to manufacture and continue to ship at least most of your products during COVID?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we do things differently. It's proven to be effective for 47 years, and so we'll continue to do it that way. But in short, we make about over 750 products. And we keep a month of raw materials in stock, and then a month in process, and then a month on the shelf. And then, of course, our global distribution network has inventory as well. And so the idea is, if we can usually handle any kind of supply chain disruptions as they might occur, whether it was the chip crisis that we had in the late 90s, or whatever it might be. And we find ourselves a little bit in that right now. But yet we're able to continue these flagship products. We're able to ship usually within 2 weeks. And because we have a lot of stock on hand, we have a lot in process. And that's been really important to our customers, where they're facing lead times 4, 10, sometimes 16 and 20 weeks before they can get their gear, before they can realize their idea. And that's a real drag. So that's been important for us, but COVID has taught us a lot of things, allowed us to reevaluate. For example, for me, I've got all this gear here. So this gear that's behind me, I've got Allen Bradley and Siemens PLCs and Epics and HDMI monitors and yada yada yada. And I would pack all that up into Pelican cases and hit the road for 2-3 weeks a month and talk to an audience and say, "Hey, check out this technology. Isn't it cool? And it solves these problems." Well, I couldn't do that during COVID. And so my COVID project was what you see here. And it was an opportunity. Funny thing is, I got all this from gamers, guys who play video games on YouTube. I was like, what tools are they using? It's all about the tools, right?
It is.
And I started to learn. And, I built the studio, built the PC, started using open source tools like OBS, open broadcasting software. A bunch of different cameras plugged in, all USB. Happy to share my gear list with anybody, and it has afforded me an opportunity to share what we know and to educate folks on these technologies and the problems they solve. And it's been great. I get great feedback, and I appreciate that. But now that it's all kind of set in, it's pretty easy to do what I do. But I can't say that I would have gone through that exercise hadn't it been us going through the pandemic. So
right.
Long answer to a kind of quick question, but there you have it.
Benson, I think we're a little over the hour at this point. I still have, I'd want to see the dashboard about the house a little more in depth. If you can talk through.
Yeah, sure. That. I can close out with that. I'm going to go over here to my desktop, and indeed, I have a Groove Epic at my home, and this is our Groove View HMI, which is included with the Epic. Is used. I'm literally talking to securely an Epic that is accessible from the internet. Obviously, this is in my home. I'm using standard IP cameras from Amazon. I think these things are like $91. They're 4K, they're PoE like our Rio here. So they're power over Ethernet. I've got, a number of security cameras throughout the exterior of the house, but it just allows me to kind of go through and change my irrigation. All my sprinklers operate from here. But here's what's important. I'm using Node-RED to reach out to a website that looks at a bunch of different factors relative to humidity and wind and temperature. And it gives me a number of how what's called the Be Water Wise weather factor. Right now it's hot in Southern California, so it's at 100%. But in the wintertime, that's 50%. So all my sprinkler times automatically adjust, and I put a lot less water. I only put the water on that I need to. But the really exciting
programmed
thing,
all this up yourself?
This is easy. This is my energy. I can see in cost per dollars per hour what it costs to run my house right now, the real-time cost, the power factor, all my trends, what my utility meter's at. I can come in and see power last day, power last week, 1 minute power. I love using the 1 minute power. So when the boys leave the Xbox on or leave the light on in their room, I can say, see, now turn the light off, and it drops off. I mean, it's just data, right? So that's another example. And then I have a lot of details about each of the phases. It's a single phase home, but I'm pulling both the phase A and phase B off of my CTs. Yeah, it's all in there, even my landscape lighting. So all the lights around the house are all managed here. They come on at sunset, they turn off at 10:30.
I mean, it's
anyway.
A lot more detailed than a lot of the Fortune 500 companies that I've been to. So I can certainly appreciate this dashboard. It's really cool.
Well, the cool thing too is, and this is what really drove the innovation behind Groove View in particular, is all of that is also run directly and securely from my phone. Get a shot there. So everything is mobile ready. And I think that's a key thing. This is a powerful computer that we all have in our pockets, has terrific software of all kinds. And now I can manage my systems from my phone. So that's kind of powerful.
I think the industry is slowly going there, but I think it's going to take a couple of years before they realize, again, like how powerful of a tool it is. And I think me and Dave spoke about the fact that, iPads are slowly making it onto the manufacturing floor. Some companies have adopted them quite well, but they're still, I think at the end of the day, it's just an HMI for them, right? Like they're not fully utilizing what it could be used for. So it's an interesting, and
I use one at my house. Yeah, it's hanging on my wall, and it says everything I just showed you right on the wall. Yeah, when you said early to market, this was our first Groove box. Well, actually, not our first one. We had one other one before this, but that was HTML5, CSS, all the technologies for mobile in 2013.
Wow.
We were a little early, but
just a couple of years.
But hey, it's a pretty accomplished product now. But
no, that is amazing. We are completely over time again. I know Vlad and I probably have at least 20 more hours of questions that we'd like to throw at you, Benson. But to be considerate, at least mildly, to everyone's time when we ask them for an hour and take nearly an hour and a half every time, we do have a couple of questions that we'd like to ask you that we kind of ask everyone. Specifically, is there a book that you would recommend? We have lots of people, not just Vlad, who purchases every book that is recommended on the show and reads it over the course of the next week. But is there a book or a couple of books, either manufacturing or otherwise, that you would suggest people take a look at?
Yeah, I have a couple of books that I've read recently or over the past couple of years. The one that I always go back to is Simon Sinek's Start With Why. I think he has a number of different books, and oddly enough, that got started with his TEDx talk, like I did one. He did one on this notion of start with why. It's a great book. It really helps you identify why you're doing things, not how or what, but what really drives you. The second one I just finished earlier this year is one called Atomic Habits. Atomic Habits is by James Clear. Terrific book about how small changes can make a big impact. And, don't swallow the whale, right? So, just little measurable changes can make a big impact. And I think that does apply to automation. And then squarely in the automation space, the book I'm reading now, it's a little bit of a bore, I'm not going to lie, but it's Industrial Network Security. And of course, that's I got that on Amazon as well. It's a little more expensive because it's a book for industry, but it's securing critical infrastructure. It's like I said
What's
before.
the name? Sorry, the second.
It's
one?
called Industrial Network Security by Eric Knapp. It's in the second edition now, and it's really a good book. Like I said, a little pricey, but hey, it's something we have to pay attention to. So, and it covers things like the ISA 62443 specification, the ISA model, and ISA IEC. It's both. So there's your book book suggestions.
Thank you, Benson. Really appreciate it.
Yep.
Hey, I'm happy to be here.
We've got one last question.
Oh, okay, sure. Let her rip.
No, one last question. If it's not readily apparent for people who have listened to this, and if you don't have 1,000 emails in your inbox already from people wanting to know more about what you and Opto22 are doing, who should reach out to you? Yeah, like what is your ideal customer? Who should reach out to you? What sort of problems do you like helping people solve, other than the strange, obscure ones that they thank you for at the end?
Well, clearly we're in the industrial automation space, of all the different verticals. We're not specific to water, wastewater, or discrete manufacturing. We cover the gamut. And, generally it's engineers, it's software developers. It is IT. We have a lot of folks that come to us from the IT space that are looking to pull real operational data in one way or another, maybe not tied to a manufacturing process, but it could be the temperature in a building. We do data centers, we do government buildings, we do all kinds of things. So generally it's people in that domain. And the best way to get a hold of us is absolutely through, obviously our website. We have a live chat. Another thing we did for COVID, we put a live chat on our website manned by our application engineers. So when you drop a chat in a line, you're not talking to a bot. You're talking to a real engineer who can help and loves to help, I should add. Talk about your application. You don't have to buy anything from us. Just ask us some questions and, hey, how would I do this? Or how would I do that? We love having those conversations and understanding what kind of problems people are trying to solve and develop the products that help do that. So somebody calling to see if I need my auto warranty upgraded. Anyway, that's generally I recommend people going to our training website for sure. Learn a little bit more about some of the problems we're solving with our products there. So, or get a hold of me. Happy to take your call. Like I said,
thanks again, Benson. Really appreciate it. Thank you for coming and speaking with us today.
It was my pleasure, guys. And I love following your work, and we'll continue to follow it. I said it earlier, I'll say it again. Keep up the great work and build this community and allow this sharing of ideas. It makes us all stronger.
Thank you also, everyone who's watching. We've got a few comments. Really appreciate it. Any last closing thoughts, Dave?
No, I think that we've taken more than enough of Benson's time. I think we all have like 1,000 hours of home automation to do now that Benson has showed us what he's got running. But no, thank you, Benson, for this. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We will catch everyone next Wednesday at the same time.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.